Welcome to the Daily Dawg podcast. This is Sunday. It's December 7th, and we are following up after the big SEC championship game this weekend, Georgia versus Alabama. And we have lots and lots to talk about and lots to celebrate. So welcome to the first quarter of our four-quarter edition of the Daily Dawg podcast. Many of you, of course, I think will probably be getting this on Monday. So this does count as the Monday podcast, but we're recording on Sunday afternoon, Sunday evening after the playoff the playoff bracket has been announced, and after we've had just plenty of time to soak in and revel how great it is to be a Georgia Bulldog on this fine day, having won our 16th SEC championship on Saturday, December 6th in the Mercedes-Benz Stadium against Alabama. And this was the game we were all looking for, in the sense that, yes, of course, we wanted to win, but it was also that game that seems to finally have exorcised the demons. And I see that all across the board. I think Brandon Adams' podcast came out this evening saying that. Seth Emerson has articles out in The Athletic, and he took a tack that I'm planning on talking about today too. And I think we all saw the same things. In fact, one of the things I texted my daughter up at University of Georgia on as it was ending up and wrapping up, and I was just starting to think about the whole thing, and it was just sort of sinking in. And one of the first things I texted this to another friend or two and a couple other people, and I said, Cole Speer was onside. And I know many of you will recognize the famous cry that Georgia fans have had now for years, since the 2017 national champion, or the 2018 national championship game. Again, back to this saga of that they call it the 2018 game, even though it was the game that followed up the 2017 season. But many of us remember that Tyler Simmons broke through the line, broke through the punt coverage, blocked the punt in what probably would have been a game-changing play in that national championship game, in which Georgia continued to lead throughout the game, and of course was tied by Alabama very late at the end of the game, and then went into overtime, and then we all know what happens. And so we all know that Tyler Simmons, the league eventually announced or agreed that the call was incorrect. Tyler Simmons was onside, but none of that changed the fact that he was called offside. And the history of the Georgia-Alabama series, and especially that potential championship, we'll never know exactly what the impact of that was. But Seth Emerson pointed this out. I didn't know this for sure, but I thought it was true. But I saw it in Seth Emerson, again, on The Athletic. I saw his article pointing out that Alabama was punting from the same end zone in Mercedes-Benz Stadium from almost the same yard distance. It was 4th and 8, and I think it was 4th and 9 in the Tyler Simmons play. They were punting from the 21, and this was from the 20, or vice versa. It was almost exactly the same. And Cole Speer broke through, and I remember Cole Speer signing, or I remember hearing about. And let me just say a quick diverting word. I haven't made any mention yet, for all you Dog fans, about recruiting, about the Jared Curtis saga or anything about that. And for those of you who haven't heard me say it before, I will talk sparingly about recruiting. There are plenty of services and podcasts and things out there if you really want to dig into the nuts and bolts of recruiting. I'm really not your guy. It's not that I don't care. I do. Just like every other Georgia fan, I want to see Georgia win in every facet we could possibly win. Whatever it is, I want to come out on top. So that competitive nature. So if there's a ranking to be had, and a recruiting ranking is a ranking you can have, then I want to be number one. Why not? And I do believe that the assemblage of talent means everything in building a program. But I also just don't find it to be a compelling way to spend my time, to be investing in the whims of 17, 18, and 19-year-old kids. And I have kids that age, so I'm not knocking them. They can be wonderful people, but they have a lot to think about. And the Jared Curtis thing just goes to show you that, he'd been committed. He was committed. then he decommitted, then he recommitted. This whole thing's gone on for a year, and then he decided to go to Vanderbilt. Well, I'll talk about that a little bit another day, because honestly, I think he made a great choice, and I applaud his thinking. And even though that didn't come up for work out for Georgia, but we have always been fine every time. I mean, Dylan Raiola last year, same thing. His whole family moves to Beaufort, Georgia. He plays football here for a whole season, so he's just down the street from the university, checking in with the university all the time, getting ready to be a Bulldog. Then at the last minute decides to go to Nebraska. And this has not impacted us in the sense that, sure, he might have been a great talent, and who knows what he would have done had he been playing quarterback for Georgia. But as you can see, we are just fine. So I'm not going to lose a lot of sleep up and down about this 18-year-old or that 18-year-old that changed their commitment and decided to do something different. You know, it's up to them and good for them. All right, moving back on to greatness and excitement. This was that kind of game that exercised those demons. That's what I was thinking about at the end of the game, was Tyler Simmons was onside. And so I just kept saying it to myself as the game ended or was wrapping up, and I was saying Cole Spear was onside. There were no crazy flags, there were no freak plays. There were several things about this game that felt different. My daughter had texted me as the game was wrapping up, and I heard this from others too, a little bit, and I kind of felt this way and I kind of didn't. I woke up Saturday and I had a certain calm, and I don't always when you get to these big games, when I know we're going to win or I feel pretty confident we're going to win. And if you've been listening to the podcast all year, I don't think I've predicted a loss yet. And I've said that. Look, I think I'm pretty good at analyzing college football and games. I have my own way of looking at the statistics, and then it's not all about statistics. You have to take what you see on paper, you have to take what you see in the stats, and then you have to combine it with a little bit of gut instinct and feel and just what you think you've seen. Combine it all together, and I would say, although I haven't really ever tried to track it too directly, and I'm not a gambler, so I don't recommend gambling, and I really don't track my record versus the spread versus not, but more often than not, I feel like I've done a pretty good job of analyzing the games, and they work out. In many ways, I think this game worked out much like I said in our final podcast on Friday before the game. I didn't do the whole 3 true outcomes and 3 true matchups prediction because, as I kind of mentioned towards the end of the podcast, I realized we've done all this before for Alabama. Yes, there have been a lot of games in between then. It had been, Georgia had an 8-game winning streak coming in, and so there was a bunch of games for both teams in between the 2 games, and yet the statistics didn't show a big difference in the teams, and I just don't think this one was going to be broken down much on statistics, other than the fact that one thing that I do think shined through in the stats, and I said I thought this would be a factor, was that Alabama is, and of course I said this in the first game, by the way, too, that Alabama is a very one-dimensional team. They're about 70-30 pass-oriented, and they have gotten away from their power run game, and that they were only averaging about 126 yards a game rushing, and they're giving up about 126 yards a game. And we were very successful. One of our most successful aspects of the first game was that we were able to rush for 227 yards in the game. Chauncey Bowens had over 120 or about 119 yards, and of course that was after Nate Frazier had been benched for fumbling, which led to a field goal, which might have been the difference. I mean, one way of looking at it is that field goal represented the difference in the score, and so it was. There were things that we did well in that game, and one of them was rush the ball, run the ball. And until late in the game, we really prevented them from running the ball. Although ultimately they were able to get up over 100 yards rushing. Still, we outrushed them, but it didn't pay off. Even though they did not commit very hard to running the ball, they were able to outpossess us. They, of course, famously had 8 or 9 third down conversions in a row to start the game, and a crazy number like 13 of 19 overall. Just way too successful on third down, way too successful possessing the ball, and especially for a team that didn't commit to running the ball. And so one of the things I said coming into this game is I thought this game would be impacted by that same thing, that as the season went on, they have not gotten better at committing to the run, and Georgia has gotten better and better and really shown a lot of strength controlling games throughout this season by committing to the run and committing to stopping the run. And where the rest of the defense had sometimes been a little leaky, it took a little while for us to develop pass rush, took a little while for our cornerbacks and safeties to get on the same page and get the experience to be a consistently good team at either intercepting the ball or creating some threat in the backfield to make teams uncomfortable passing the ball. the run defense and the run offense had been there from the beginning of the season. And of course, Gunner's ability to use his legs and just stay out of negative plays or particularly bad plays, and at least always give us a chance to look at maybe 3rd and 6 or 3rd and 7, 3rd and 4, instead of 3rd and 9 and 3rd and 12 kind of plays. You just haven't seen that much this season. That's been a factor in keeping the Georgia offense on the field, grinding out time of possession, grinding out first downs, grinding out yardage, while never being super dynamic. Georgia's never really, we've had a couple games where we've had over 500 yards of offense, and when we had to be pushed into shootouts, we did. So I didn't think we would be able to win a shootout. I didn't really get to. That's one thing I didn't do, is I didn't say, well, what are the outcomes? The true outcomes are you either get blown out, you blow the team out, or it's a close game. But I did say that I thought it would be a close game, although I said I thought the flow of the game would be that Georgia would get up, maybe up 7, and then up 10, maybe 13, and then maybe Alabama would be able to score again and draw it back to like a 1-score game or a 3-point game, and it would kind of ebb back to maybe a 10 or a 13-point game, and maybe towards the end Alabama would have a little final flurry where they took a 10 or a 13-point game and got it back to a 1-score game, only to have it either stay there and never get any closer, or Georgia push the margin back. And I thought that's how the flow would go. And I kind of envisioned something like 27-24, something in that range. So I did think that there was a chance that if Georgia put it all together, they could blow them out. And of course, part of that is we have been doing that lately. The games that we have played most recently have led to similar type blowouts. We have been able to, our last 4 games now, we beat Texas 35-10. Charlotte, of course, not super competitive, but still 35-3. Georgia Tech 16-9. That's not a huge blowout, but again, held them to under 10 points. And Alabama now 28-7. So the consistent theme there is, what's the defense done? 10-3-9-7. 29 points in 4 games, or a 7.5-point average, which is very elite number. So the defense had really been playing at a high level, and the offense has been continuing to possess the ball, grind out first down, grind out yardage, and be efficient in the red zone. Except for the one reason that the Georgia Tech game was a lot closer was we settled for a lot of field goals. So again, kudos to the Georgia offense. They corrected the difference between the Georgia Tech game and this game against Alabama. No field goals. As much as I love Peyton Woodring, and I'm really proud about how good he is, and I think it's sort of sad in a way. I realized he, they talked about the Lou Groza finalists, that Georgia Tech's kicker was a Lou Groza finalist, and I thought, well, Peyton Woodring should be. Well, I guess they already announced the finalist, and he didn't get that. Well, we've only now, even coming into the Alabama game, we've only attempted 16 field goals, 15 on the year. You see a lot of these Lou Groza guys have had 25 attempts, and they maybe made like 23 out of 25. Peyton Woodring's only been called on 16 times all year, and he's only missed 1. So I think part of the reason he hasn't gotten more love is because he just hasn't been necessary. Georgia is in the top 25 in red zone offense and very effective at scoring touchdowns. We've only settled for field goals within the red zone 6 times. So we've used Peyton Woodring very appropriately. We've used him when we need points from outside the red zone, and that's what you need a great kicker for, and that's what you are okay with, is when a drive stalls out and you're outside the red zone, then by all means take the points and move on, keep grinding out yards and points. But when you get in the red zone, let's put it in the end zone. And Georgia did that emphatically in this game. So only had 4 scoring drives out of 11 times that we held the ball. We had maybe there was 12. Well, I guess we had 12 true drives in the game, and we scored 4 of those. So that's not a great percentage, but when you score touchdowns on all of them, and especially when you limit the other team to only 1 touchdown, well, then you're in pretty good shape. So this game, first thing as we're rounding out quarter 1 here, and we're just going to keep reveling in this as we go. This is going to be a lot of thoughts and quick hitters, just recapping and just excitement and enthusiasm about this, because I think this is a real big moment. I think we all know that. I think we all felt it. I think we all hoped it, and I think we all got the most we could have hoped for out of this. So the main theme here for quarter 1, and you remember we do our 4 quarters, we just take a quick break and then we reset and we come back, usually with different topics. The topics here is just going to be randomly enjoying every bit of a huge monumental moment in Georgia football, getting the elephant off the back. And yes, look, this only makes 2 of the last 12, right? And we might have thought that this same thing was true when we were able to emphatically, when Keely Ringo intercepts that pass back in 2021 in Lucas Oil Field up in Indianapolis, and he stretched a 8-point game to a 15-point game. We all might have thought that was the moment where we emphatically got over that Alabama hump. Didn't prove to be the case, but we'll keep talking as we go on throughout the podcast today about how maybe this time it is a little bit different. But at a minimum, at least for right now, elephant off the back, all the excitement and enthusiasm you could hope to have, and the energy and the momentum going into the playoffs on the side of the Georgia Bulldogs, and lots more to talk about. So quarter 1 is in the books. We're going to take a quick break, and then we'll be back for quarter 2. Just remember, Cole Speer was onside, baby. Go Dogs. Welcome back to quarter 2 of the Daily Dawg podcast for episode 55, which is Sunday, December 7th. It's actually on the first one, and I apologize. December 7th was yesterday, Saturday, December 7th. Today is Sunday, December 8th. And most of you will probably be getting this podcast on Monday, December 9th. So, but this is episode 55, and this is quarter 2. So in quarter 1, our theme was Cole Speer was onside, which I think was just the perfect metaphor for how this so much, as so many Dawg fans feel and are talking about, and other commentators and people have already grabbed onto the same idea. This was an exercising of demons. Amazingly, the block punt, which got the whole thing sort of rolling after both teams exchanged punts and went nowhere. The block punt was literally in the same end zone, in the same stadium, basically in the same yardage and same distance as the Tyler Simmons play, which was, became the rallying cry for so many Georgia fans from the 2017-2018 game, was Tyler Simmons was onside. So that's why I chose the Cole Speer was onside. But listen, we did beat Alabama back in the 2021 national championship game. And like I said, I think many of us would have hoped or thought that that moment was going to exercise demons. Here we were on the biggest stage. We avenged our one other loss of the SEC or the national championship game, the one with the Tyler Simmons play, where we led the entire game, but were tied at the end of regulation, then lost in overtime. Then we turn around, and this time had led early in the game. Alabama eventually takes the lead in that game, if you remember, after the horrific fumble/pass that Stetson Bennett had. And it felt like at that time that was going to be that moment. We'd all already seen more than one collapse where Georgia had led the game, and Alabama would come back to take the lead and then just kind of pull away. And so it felt like that moment. Alabama takes the lead, goes up 13-12. I think was the score at that time after that big fumble. But then Stetson Bennett just right down the field, a pair of touchdown drives, and now we're back up by 8 points. But it's still tense. Alabama has the ball, and you just feel like this is Alabama. If any team is going to drive the length of the field with the last possession, score the touchdown and the 2-point conversion, and send this thing to overtime. And then again, we've been in overtime with these guys before, and it turned, what they did is turn in an epic play for all the ages that they keep talking about, and we just hang our head on. So all of that happened. Instead, Keely Ringo intercepts the pass, returns it for the touchdown, and Georgia wins by 15 points. And that 15-point win is one of the bigger losses in the Nick Saban coaching career. So you would have thought that was a moment where we exercised those demons, but it doesn't prove to be the case. We don't end up playing Well, in the 2022 season, we don't end up playing Alabama in the SEC championship game. It ends up being LSU in the game, and we beat LSU fairly handily, although LSU put up a lot of points, but we win that game 50-30, kind of a big beatdown, or at least, anytime you put up 50, even when you get up 30, what everybody remembers is, yeah, but they scored 50. 50 is just such a big number. And so we go on to win our second back-to-back national championship. So without having to play Alabama again that time. Then in 2023, we go through the entire regular season undefeated. At times we looked a little shaky, but at times we looked powerful and like the number one team in the country. And we maintained that for quite a while until we get to Alabama in the SEC championship game. And suddenly our 29-game winning streak comes to an end in the SEC championship game in a narrow loss, in which I still contend and feel like we were the better team, but we made one or two or a few more mistakes. We didn't play up to our capacity. We were a little limited by injuries to Ladd McConkey and Brock Bowers, but and I was thinking, not that I forgot who Brock Bowers was, but I was just thinking about how I was going to point out. Now, of course, Bama fans, have forever complained about how their wide receivers got hurt in the game that we beat them. So, even we get one game that we win out of 11, and Bama fans are still like, well, yeah, but so-and-so was out and so-and-so was out. Okay, well, fine. It happens. It's part of the game, injuries, right? But nonetheless, But we were a little hampered, and yet we were there. We were right there. We lost the game by 3 points, and we had a strip sack fumble in that game. Defense held, but they were already in field goal range. They got the field goal. That ended up being the difference in the game. And so, yet again, Alabama foils what had been both a long winning streak, ends our 29-game winning streak, and that loss also takes what I think was definitely one of the four best teams in the country, but in that playoff version where we still were in the 4-team playoff, and many people saw the conference championship games as elimination games, Alabama took our spot, even if we were still one of the four best teams in the country. Alabama, however, wasn't, I don't think, as good or as powerful a team. They go on to the national championship game. They lose to Michigan. Now, Michigan will go on to win the national championship, but I've said this many a time on this season, on podcasts this season, I would love to have seen Georgia, that 2023 Georgia team, play that Michigan team. I think it was a good matchup, and I think we would have had a very strong chance to win that game, better than Alabama's chances. So, but yet again, Alabama takes that opportunity away from us. They take the SEC championship away from us, and they take that opportunity away from us, and we end up having to go beat the snot out of a whining, crying, pathetic Florida State, who just couldn't be bothered to have to play their bowl game with any integrity because they were so dismayed about being left out of the championship or the playoff. Never mind the fact that they had no frickin' chance. They weren't that great a team, even with their star quarterback. But with their star quarterback, they maybe had a chance. They had a pretty good defense and one great player. And if he could run around enough and make enough plays, then maybe they could advance. But it's really hard to beat two really good playoff caliber teams when that's your offensive style. So I don't think at their best they were really that much of a great contender. The ACC has been shown time and time again that you come 13-0 out of the ACC. That doesn't mean anything. You could have come 13-0 out of a high school conference too. So, I mean, that's really harsh on the ACC. But this year, the ACC, look, the ACC is just, I even heard somebody, like we used to say about Clemsoning, I even heard somebody already talking about how the ACC just ACC'd themselves again with this ridiculous, some sort of fifth tiebreaker that gets a 7-5 Duke team in the playoff against Virginia. Neither of these are really elite teams. Virginia's had a nice season, but nobody thinks Virginia, even at 10-2, is a team that's really going to rally in the playoffs and beat legitimately good teams. Their conference is embarrassingly okay because nobody even has less than 2 losses in the whole conference, and there are a bunch of mediocre teams that they're playing when they're not playing, when the best teams are not playing each other. And so Duke gets in this game and embarrasses the whole system and the ACC by winning the game. So now you have an unranked 8-5 conference champion. And, the committee bailed them out by making sure that Miami jumped their way from out of the playoff position last week and the previous couple weeks into the playoff position, or the ACC would have really had to choke down some humble pie because they were in it's still pretty embarrassing. But nonetheless, that Georgia had to go play the whiny, awful Florida State. Oh, woe is us. Never mind the fact that Georgia was also snubbed when you consider the idea of who are the four best teams in the country. Clearly, that Georgia team was one of the four best teams in the country. But instead of whining and complaining and quitting and, all those things, Georgia just put up their big boy pants, went down to the bowl game and just absolutely kicked ass and destroyed whatever bunch of Florida State players decided to show up with a jersey on and play. And, that's how you show people what you're doing. So as a side note, looks like Notre Dame is going to preemptively take the Florida State whiny, I'm going to take my ball and go home attitude. They got left out and they've already put out a statement. Nobody signed it. Just this ridiculous statement saying, we will not be participating in bowl season. What a joke. I mean, absolute joke. I mean, come on, guys. The history of college football has been dominated by bowl games, which Notre Dame has dominated. But, we can't go to the playoff, and we're so mad because you had two good teams. You had two top 25 teams on your entire schedule, basically, and you went out and you played those and you lost them. And I kept hearing that all season is like, oh, Notre Dame, well, they had two really good losses. A good loss shouldn't earn you any credit at all. A good loss maybe just means we don't count the loss against you because you played an elite team. We're not going to say, well, or we look at the loss, they say, well, this team has 3 losses, or this team has 2 losses, this other team has 1 or no losses. We're not going to keep this team out just because of the losses. Notre Dame's not in the playoff because of their 2 great losses. Notre Dame's not in the playoff because since they don't have a conference and they don't, it's not their fault necessarily that teams maybe didn't live up to expectation, but they didn't have any really great teams on their schedule other than those first 2, Miami and Texas A&M. Those 2 teams proved to both be top 15 teams. So guess what? You played 2 really good teams on your schedule and you lost to both of them. I'm sorry, that doesn't qualify you to keep telling me you're a great team. Oh, but we won 10 in a row against inferior and everybody keeps making this stupid excuse. Well, but they did what they're supposed to do against inferior competition. Okay, everybody looks good against inferior competition. If anything, the Big Ten championship game last night just showed you again what happens. Indiana and Ohio State waltzed through their season playing inferior competition left and right, and they just put up dominant stats, dominant numbers. And I'm not saying they're not great teams. I believe they probably are. But look what happens when they actually play an equal team. All of a sudden, it's not leading the world in every possible statistic. In fact, it's neither of them can even score 17 points in the game. Okay, so maybe that was a defensive slugfest. Maybe it's an example of an epic game between 2 great offenses and 2 great defenses and the immovable, force against, or the unmovable object against the irresistible force. We'll break that down another day when we have more time. But it does show you the point that look how great those teams looked until they finally played a really good other team. And then you didn't see world beater teams moving up and down the field making epic plays. What you saw in that game was kind of a snooze fest of a game where not that much happened until the end when Ohio State missed the critical field goal after sort of lollygagging around the whole game, and then Indiana made some big plays to to burn up the clock and seal the game. And a couple big throws by Mendoza, a couple big catches, and they had a few first downs. The next thing you know, game is sealed. And so that was really the most dramatic part of the game. The rest of the game, both teams missed a field goal. Neither team was particularly great in the red zone. I don't even know if Indiana always got in the red zone, but they drove through the middle of the field but got stalled a lot when they got close to the red zone or in the red zone. Ohio State, Indiana missed a field goal. Ohio State missed a 27-yard field goal to tie the game. Again, not exactly the stuff of championship effort. I don't know how good their kicker is or isn't, but he shanks a 27-yarder that was needed to preserve an undefeated season. So I'm not saying they're not good teams. I'm not even saying they're not great teams. I'm just saying, going back to the Notre Dame thing, by perspective, Notre Dame gets left out of the playoff and they're why we won 10 straight. And people are like, you should have seen how great they looked. We watched the film. They look great. And I heard a bunch of people even saying, well, we went back and watched that first game where against Miami. And I think today Notre Dame would have beaten today Miami. Okay, think that all you want. But guess what? In this season, which is what counts, there's a reason we play these games. And so if you're not going to count the head-to-head, and I think it's good that Miami got in, if one of them couldn't get in, then it was Miami who should have, because they won the head-to-head game. And I don't care if it's been the beginning of the season and Notre Dame's playing better now and Miami's not as good as they were then, or Notre Dame's much better than they were. Whatever. This is the season. We played the game. If you're just going to theorize the whole thing, you know what? We could just assemble game teams on paper and then look up and down the thing and say, well, look at all these players they have. Let's just theorize it. Let's have a computer run a bunch of simulations, and then we'll decide who should play in the playoffs. Skip the regular season. Again, don't keep telling me this playoff system doesn't devalue the regular season when it took all the way to the end of the season on the last day when the rankings come out for somebody to finally realize, hey, if two teams basically have the same record and they played each other and one team won, then that's what counts. It shouldn't even be a discussion. Shouldn't have been hard to figure out. That's the only thing that matters. That was this season. I don't care if it was the first game of the season. It was this frickin' season. So they played the game. Miami won it. They have the same record. Why are we even talking about it? It's the dumbest argument ever. It's not that Notre Dame did something wrong or deserves punishment or, has been so wrong. Guess what? They were wrong by the rules. The rule says the top five, the top five conference champions get a bid into the playoff. And then the remaining 7 slots go to the 7 best at large teams. Okay, well, you know what? You weren't a conference champion because you don't even have a conference, because you refused to join a conference. So I don't care that that's your problem. You didn't play a conference championship game and impress anybody because you don't have one. Okay, so you scheduled a bunch of teams. Maybe you did the best you could. Maybe you didn't. You had one win against the top 25 team, and the 2 best teams you played, you lost. I don't care if they were close losses. I don't care. You lost. And one of those was to a team that has basically the exact same record as you, same 10-2 record, same strength of schedule, same every metric you can look at, and they won and you lost. So if that's what it came down to, then so what? You're out. I'm sorry. Go blame the rule that allowed 2 group of 5 teams to get in there. Go blame the ACC for having such a complicated tiebreaker that they couldn't figure out how to have an appropriate championship game so that Miami could have played in the game, won the ACC championship, and not had 2 group of 5 teams get in there. So these are things we can change. But you know what? When you're sitting down around 10, and look, I'll accept it. When it's us, when we're in a season where we're hovering around 10 or 11 or 12, don't sit there and whine and moan and complain. You had the chance to win. You have beat Texas A&M or beat Miami. If you'd won either of those 2 games, if you're Notre Dame, then guess what? Wouldn't even been discussion. You'd been in the playoff. You'd been like the 7, 8, 5 seed. You'd have been golden. So handle your business, win your games. We didn't look great all season. We won 12 games. We lost 1. And we turned around and beat the snot out of that team who actually beat us. So this was a little rant that took quarter 2 off schedule a little bit, but this was part of the thing we were going to talk about. I was probably going to do that in quarter 4. So we're going to get back to just talking about the great victory of Georgia over Alabama, but we did kind of tie into it there at the end. So we're going to take a quick break for the end of quarter 2. We'll come back in quarter 3 and we'll get back on track talking about UGA beating down Alabama and what does this mean for our program and going into the playoff. So we'll take a quick break. Just revel in the greatness for the moment, and go Dogs. Welcome back to the Daily Dawg podcast. Today is Sunday, December 7th, and it's a good thing that you come to me, or if you're here, you want to talk about Georgia football, you want to talk about college football, sports, and not what day it is or calendar or weather, because I keep screwing that one up. So I said on the first quarter that it was December 7th, and it's Sunday, December 7th. And then I got confused. I looked at something and I thought I was looking at tomorrow's date and calendar. And so I was like, wait, no, I said it was the 7th, but it's the 8th. It's not the 8th. Monday is the 8th. And that's because I was looking ahead and thinking most of you will probably get this podcast on Monday the 8th, not on Sunday. So by the time I actually finish putting it all together and go through the posting process, which actually takes sometimes between an hour and 2 hours to finalize it and post it, then it probably actually will be Monday, and I don't think any of you will even get the chance to see it on Sunday. So anyway, I digress. I apologize if I confused you in quarter two. I'm not going to go back and re-record it, but I did say in quarter two that I was wrong from quarter one, that Sunday was actually December 8th. Nope, that's not the case. It is Monday, December 8th. This is being recorded on Sunday, December 7th. And either way, I bet you don't care. So let's move on, reveling in the fact that Georgia has beaten Alabama by 21 points in the SEC championship game, a thorough beatdown, and the kind of beatdown that we have seen Georgia put upon many teams over the Kirby Smart era. And what we really see now is we see a team that is rounding into its own, and we may have had questions early in the season, and I've talked about that a bunch. Yeah, the defense didn't look quite like a vintage Georgia defense. There was all those critiques about why does Georgia have to start so slow? Why do they have to wait until they're behind? Yes, we got a lot of credit for being hard to kill. And Kirby himself even said, hey, you can't kill us. Josh Pate, if you catch his college football podcast and show, and I recommend that as another one you might enjoy listening to. Josh Pate does a great job. Josh Pate has used the thing all season talking about Georgia football is you got to cut the head off the snake is what he's been saying. And most everybody has failed to cut the head off the snake when you're playing Georgia. And I think that's a pretty good way of looking at it. And that's true. But now this team has evolved past that. And like I said in quarter one, you look at these last four games and you look at the scores and you see a team that's looking a lot like what we're used to seeing when we've seen championship Georgia football in 2021 and 2022. And even the 2023 season, which didn't lead to a championship, but was a great season and a team that only lost one game on the year and finished in the top three of the country. So you're seeing games that look much more like that. You have Texas, who's back up within the top 15 to finish the season, right? Didn't make the playoff. I know they're disappointed with that, but they are back up within the top 13, I think, top 15, either way. They're right up there. What are we doing there? 35-10. Charlotte, of course, we're going to beat Charlotte 35-3. We just went through the motions and played our game. Georgia Tech, 16-9. As I've talked about many a time, that's a game we controlled throughout the game, though. We really had that game much more in hand, and the big problem was that we only had one touchdown. We settled for 3 field goals. If we had been more efficient in the red zone and in our scoring drives like we were against Alabama this last weekend, and we scored just like we did against Alabama, touchdowns on all 4 drives that led to scores and got in the red zone, then the Georgia Tech game might have looked different as well. That was also a game in which you scored 4 times, but 3 of them were field goals. So you flip it around that, and that game could have been, so again, from a point of view of control, that game could have easily been 28-9 as opposed to 16-9. But by settling for those field goals, we kept Georgia Tech a little bit more in the game, and they played really well. And they had what was easily their best defensive performance of the year. But then now you see this game, and this game was interesting. So the Georgia-Alabama game, I mean, first of all, again, Georgia beats Alabama. And I started winding my way to this. I was trying to get to in quarter two, and I got off track on my little rant about Notre Dame. And that was going to be part of today's podcast anyway, because I saw the news as I was putting together my notes, getting ready for this podcast, that Notre Dame has rejected their opportunity to play a bowl this game. And I'm just thinking, what a bunch of pissy patsies. I mean, that's just so lame. And it just rejects Notre Dame football is supposed to be about tradition. And they're supposed to, I mean, the whole idea of being independent and all the tradition. And here they're just going to thumb their nose at the bowl tradition, say, if it's not the playoff, we don't want it. You know, we're so mad we didn't get in. And again, sorry guys, you don't have that great an argument. You had a good argument, okay, but it's not a great argument because you were always on the bubble. So you're sitting there saying, well, between Alabama and this, that, and the other, and pointing at all these stats. Guess what? You're on the bubble because you played your way onto the bubble. You lost to the two best teams you played. You only had one top 25 win. You look great winning 10 games against a bunch of overmatched teams. Big deal, okay? Don't lose to every top 15 team you play. Win one of those, win two of them, no discussion whatsoever. You're got to bye. Win both those games, they'd had a bye. So I don't want to hear about their 10-game win streak against overmatched opponents. I want to know that when they went on the road and played Miami, they won. Didn't, sorry. Oh, but it was only by, a missed extra point, whatever, a missed extra point. Or that was against Texas A&M, I'm sorry. But it was a one-score game against Miami. So what? Okay, you lost. We lost by one score. You don't hear us walking around going, oh, it was so sad. We lost to Alabama, but it was a great loss. We should get so much credit for how we lost to Alabama because it was one score. No, you know what we did about it? We are in a conference. So since we're in a conference, we got a chance to have a rematch in the conference championship game. What did we do about losing to Alabama? We came back and kicked their butts in the game. All right. We won by 21 points and we exercised some demons here. And I think we really did. I think this was a big turning point. Now, look, let's be honest. This is not the vintage Alabama teams of the Nick Saban era. And frankly, even the Nick Saban era, not that he was losing his touch or he wouldn't have been able to adapt. Sorry for smacking the microphone there. It's not that he wouldn't have been able to adapt or keep going, but his last team or two were, his last team was the only one after his second team. His second team reached number one in the AP poll, and every team from then until that last team was at least at some point in the season ranked number one in the AP poll. So that team only got to a high of 3 or 4, that last team. And yes, it beat us in the SEC championship game and then went and played Michigan, but didn't have a pretty good game, a very good game against Michigan, and lost in the playoff. And the last team to win a national championship was the one that won the championship in 2020. So it's now been a minute since Alabama's won a national championship. It's, they've had more seasons now that have ended in losses than they're used to. When you're used to, because when you win, obviously you don't lose. So your last game is a win when you win the championship. So it's already, even the last season, 2 seasons of Nick Saban were already a little different than what people were used to in terms of not winning that every other year championship, national championship. And then Kalen DeBoer has come in, and now Kalen DeBoer has lost 4 games last season and 3 this season. So Alabama's lost 7 games in the last 2 seasons. And I know there's some consternation for Alabama fans about that, because you have to go all the way back to Nick Saban's first year in 2007 when they, to find a time where they lost even 6 games in a span of 2 seasons. 6 games in a span of even 3 or 4 seasons. So this is a real different feel. And, they missed the playoff last year. They were terrified. I think Bama fans were terrified or thinking they were going to miss the playoff again. I know Kalen DeBoer was. You saw him on TV in the press conference after the game arguing for his team's life, explaining, and he had all the right arguments. We did this, we did that, we did that. The good news for him is that the committee agreed with him. Basically, they ignored this game, which I'm a little disappointed about. We played so great. I want a lot of accolades for it, right? I want everybody to pat us on the back. I want everybody to be like, wow, that was something. And it basically feels like the playoff committee essentially ignored our game. Alabama was number 9 before the game. They got waxed by 21 points. They're still number 9. We were number 3 before the game. You would have thought, hey, if we just win, but it's just a close game, we probably stay number 3. That was my thinking going in. We talked about playoff scenarios a little bit. That was my thinking going in. But I thought if we really play well and we were able to somehow blow out Alabama, and, then there's a chance we jump the loser of the Big 12 championship game. And again, I didn't see that game. I watched some of it. I didn't watch it intently. Honestly, I was a little bit too excited about checking through media and looking at articles and reading about and going through stats and just reveling in the Georgia game. So I had the Ohio State Indiana Big Ten championship game on, but I had a hard time concentrating on it in the way that I usually watch and evaluate football games. My sense of it, just it being on and watching it, was that, both teams played okay. It wasn't that this juggernaut 1 versus 2, Goliath versus David, unbelievable matchup of, forces that can't be stopped. It just looked like two pretty good teams, neither of which played overly great on offense and mostly seemed to get away from doing what they do best. I mean, where was Ohio State's big wide receivers? Mendoza, until late in the game, didn't put up big numbers. Although it's true that he started the game kind of weak, and there was a graphic that showed that he was really quite strong for after the first quarter or the first however many drives of the game. So I guess Mendoza had a really pretty good game, but it just, watching it, it didn't jump out that they were blowing you away offensively. So, but yeah, I was reveling in the Georgia-Alabama game, and I was reveling in the facts. So a few key facts, you probably heard these before, but I think they can be said as many times as any Georgia fan. Anytime two Georgia fans get together, then there should be reveling. And reveling includes pointing out that this was the largest win against Alabama since 1976. Georgia won the SEC championship in 1976 behind quarterback Ray Goff. And they went 10-1-1, I think, that year, something like that. Won the SEC championship. And in that season, they played Alabama and beat them 21-0. So this was the largest victory Georgia's had against Alabama since that. Georgia's back-to-back SEC champion since the first time since 1980, 82, 81, 82. So the Herschel Walker era, this is the first time we've won back-to-back SEC champions. Coming into the game, I told you this would be our 16th SEC championship. Everybody's talked about it, said it was, and it is. But hey, just worth pointing out again that really helps put a little bit more distance and a lock on second most SEC championships of all time. Tennessee has 13. We have 16. Alabama has 30. This was also the net zero nature or the zero sum nature of college football that I like to talk about a lot. Means that we won, Bama lost. It could have been the other way around, meaning that the gap, if Bama won, we would still be stuck at 15 and they would have 31. So the gap between us would just be that much bigger, right? But instead we won and they lost. So they didn't get the SEC championship, we did. So now it's 16. So now the gap is 14. So again, gap of 14. I don't think we're closing that down anytime soon. The Kirby era has been amazing. And again, some of this started in the Mark Richt era, but we've been talking all season about, from the history and our rival point of view, how we have now won 8 in a row against Auburn, 8 in a row against Georgia Tech, 9 in a row against Tennessee, 5 in a row against Florida. And here we finally, you're not going to get that excited about the big picture on the Alabama. It's still just 2 out of 12, 2 out of the last 12 against Alabama. But now we have beaten them in a championship game. We've beaten them in Mercedes-Benz Stadium where they hadn't lost to anybody, including us. We have beaten them in an SEC championship, and we took a championship away from them. They win this game, they get a championship. But nope, we said that's ours, and we took it from them. It was the largest margin of defeat that they've had in quite some. I mean, it ties that. I think they also lost by 21 to Oklahoma last year. I forgot how stunning that game was. So I would have liked to have thought, oh, look, even in the Kalen DeBoer era, which doesn't have that invincibility sense that the Nick Saban era had, I'd like to have thought we still, had done something special. But it looks like, it's still something special to beat the Tide by 21 points. But we corrected we got the block punt and it didn't go wrong. And then the other thing we did is we built the lead. This is the other one. I think we all had to be sitting there, whether you're at the game or you're watching it in a sports bar or with friends or just at home on TV. Even when we were up 14-0, I know we all felt, yeah, we've all been here before. And we had. Georgia had been up 13-0. Georgia had been up 14-0. Georgia had been up as many as 14 points in several of these games. And I think the number is that Georgia actually led 7 of the, coming into the game, of the 10 out of 11 that we lost, Georgia had actually led 7 of those games. So you go back to the national championship game 2021, and we led. And that's why the Tyler Simmons is onside is such a big deal, because we led that game 13-0. at the half. They switch quarterbacks and Tua comes in. He gets a touchdown. It gets to be 13-7. We get a 80-yard touchdown to stretch the lead back to 20-7. One of those scores that looks like, wow, we're up 20-7. But again, only 13 points. Alabama's able to tie it back up at the end and put it to overtime. And we know what happened there. The next year, we play them in the SEC championship game, and we are up. I don't remember all the intervals, but we were up, I think 14-0, and then I think at one point it got to be 28-14, and we end up losing 35-28 or 32-20. Yeah, 35-28. You go back to the 2012 game, we led that game by 14 points. And I think we might have led that game by more than once by 14 points. End up losing 32-28. And again, not only was that an SEC championship lost, but given that Alabama won the right to go on and beat the snot out of Notre Dame for an easy national title, there's another national title loss. So we lost a national title and a SEC championship in that game. And, this game wouldn't have had that kind of consequence, but it may be a springboard. I said coming in, if we get this elephant off our back, that might just be the kind of momentum that takes this team that thinks they can, pretty sure they can, has really looked better and better to, hey, now we're putting it all together. Now we can dominate. Now we can play anybody. We can play Ohio State. We can play Indiana. We can play Oregon. We can play anybody in this field and feel confident going in that, hey, we can win this game, and they should be as scared or more scared of us than we are of them. So we're going to take a break here at the end of quarter 3, and we'll come back and we'll do just a little bit more reveling in quarter 4 so that we can just have a big grin on our face all day on Monday, just thinking about how great this was and reveling in all these stats. So short break, end of quarter 3, episode 55 of the Daily Dawg podcast on Sunday, December 5th, that you'll probably be seeing on Monday, December 8th. So thanks for being here, and go Dogs! Welcome back to the Daily Dawg podcast. Today is Sunday, December 7th, and this is episode 55 of the Daily Dawg podcast, and we are now in quarter 4. So this is our last quarter of today's podcast to revel in excitement and joy and just the euphoria of a real beatdown against Alabama, something the Georgia fan base, the Georgia team, the Georgia coaches, all of us really needed was to stop losing to Alabama. And, throughout the time, it's not, as we were just talking about in quarter 3, it's not exactly like, yes, there were some games where they actually just blew us away. The 2020 regular season game, the final score of that got a little ugly, although I think we led early in that game. I don't remember for sure. Mostly what I remember is Stetson Bennett had multiple turnovers in that game, kind of got away from us. But actually, of the 10 of 11 that we had lost coming in, I was making the point that we had led 7 of those games, and we were talking about a couple of them that we knew we led for sure and how it worked out. And yesterday might have reminded you for a while, or you might have had a little PTSD thinking about, even as we were up and ahead. The question is, how much fun were you having? How much were you reveling in being up 14-0 at the half? I had a little consternation. I was telling people around me and texting with a few people and talking about how I was not a little disappointed. I was very disappointed. Kirby, I think, made a bold and very exciting move by going for that 4th down. There was all that back and forth in the exchange, but then they confidently go for the 4th down. They did sort of corrected the mistake of the first game where they kind of rushed it and had the wrong personnel in. You end up with Josh McCray, who just doesn't go down in short yardage situations. You end up with him in the game, everybody knowing where the blocking is. He gets behind the blocking and he picks up the short first down by several yards, right? So, and now this is towards the end of the half, so you've got the opportunity where we're flipping the script on Alabama. Alabama won the toss and deferred, so you've made them punt, you've got the ball, you're grinding out some yards, and now you've got a good opportunity to get up or at or near midfield and get over that area. And at this point, when you go for the fourth down, you come out of that fourth down when McCray hits the ground and you're about 8 yards away from Peyton Woodring field goal range. So you're thinking, okay, you don't have to be super aggressive, but we just need to at least get 8, 9, 10 yards. I mean, one more first down, even if you don't gain anything from there, you're probably in Woodring's field goal range. You're getting close to the end of the half. You kick that field goal and you go up 17-14. And that 17 is a big deal because 17 is 3 scores. So you go into the second half up 3 scores, and Bama's getting the ball to start the second half. So for all the good work you've done and dominating the first half, blocking a punt, getting an interception, you're only up 2 scores, and they're getting the ball first to start the second half. So I can see the classic Alabama comeback coming at us, right? Where it's like, okay, they get the ball to start the second half. I can see Ty Simpson hitting a few passes. Maybe Ryan Williams breaks free. Man, did he look tough. I mean, he's a skinny little dude, right? He's not like I say he's a skinny dude. I mean, if I got next to him, he's probably be like, oh, okay, sorry, you're pretty muscly and whatever. But what I mean is, compared to other guys on the field, he doesn't look like, this big, oh my gosh, nobody can, again, he's not Josh McCray. Josh McCray is, 245 pounds, and you got to be serious. You got to be a man to bring Josh McCray down, right? So, but you can't get a hand on Williams. I mean, a couple of times he got the ball, he just like jitterbugged away from everybody, and just we got him out of bounds, but it's like we didn't really get him down. It's just kind of crazy. But anyway, I could see him getting a breakaway play, right? He had one breakaway play where it looked like he was going to rip off 20, 25 yards. They called it back about 8 or 10 yards that he stepped out of bounds. He still got about 12 or 15 yards. So thankfully it wasn't as explosive as it could have been. They didn't get into Georgia territory, but I could just see Simpson gets hot. Maybe the pass rush doesn't quite get there in the second half. They go down the field, they score a touchdown. All of a sudden, it's a 1-score game, and all this domination from the first half didn't go anywhere. And so at that point in the game, I was pretty critical. I was pretty upset with the play calling. I did not like what we saw from the team after the fourth down, because it just didn't look like there was very good plays, didn't look like they were well executed, and that seemed like a big moment in the game, especially given the history of this game. How many times we had been up 13 or 14 points all the way into the third, maybe even fourth quarter of the game, only to lose the game. And that's because, like back in 2017, again, this is why Tyler Simmons was onside is such a big deal. He was onside. Getting that block punt would have had the opportunity to create what we saw here, a game that just gets away from Alabama. As it turned out, even with the block punt being overturned on the wrong blown call from the official saying he was offsides, we still end up that half up 13-0. But again, you've scored 3 times. 13-0 is you've scored 3 times, right? A field goal and 2 touchdowns. But that's just not efficient enough. If it's at least 2 touchdowns and a field goal, then you're up 3 scores, not just 2. Even though you scored 3 times, you're still 13-0, 2 touchdowns, and you're trailing by a point. So that's where we've been. We've always been able to just get just that far, but never able to turn over. We never were able to get the ball in our hands and create one more scoring drive to get up by 3 scores. And so I just kept looking for that. I felt confident. I was saying, I woke up Saturday, and a lot of times when you have these bigger games and, there's really, the modern Kirby era, I'm not scared of anything now. I had a little tingle on the Ole Miss game and the Tennessee games, because on paper, it was like, hey, these are good teams. We could lose these games. And I knew they were going to score a lot, and I was not 100% confident that our offense, especially going into the Tennessee game, could score with Tennessee. Turns out Tennessee wants to play a shootout. We can win that. Same thing with Ole Miss. Ole Miss, you're going to score a touchdown on your first 5 drives. I was just talking how important that was how important that is in football, college football, to be that efficient, to score touchdowns on your drives. You get 5 drives, you get 5 touchdowns. You're going to win a lot of games. That's 35 points, right? Well, Georgia scored on 8 consecutive drives. Yes, we settled for field goals, but we scored on all 8 of our drives. And so we outscored them. And so I was a little nervous about those games, but I had my first, and maybe I've told you this, Ritual, or not. When it comes to, I'm overly and weirdly superstitious in a way that I really don't believe is true, but when it comes time to get dressed for a game, like I worked out midday or I worked out while I was watching game day. So I got to take a shower and start thinking about getting some lunch and being ready to be in position for the game. And the hardest part was going in my closet and looking you can see I have no shortage of Georgia gear, but look at the wall behind me, right? Obviously I've invested in Georgia paraphernalia, but but I do have this sense that certain clothes, this shirt, by the way, see, this is a tried and true shirt, these Champion Georgia, and they stopped selling these, by the way, which I'm very frustrated with. If you're looking on the video, you can see this is the classic G in the middle, and it's sort of the rounded, it's not a straight Georgia, but it's just Georgia block letters. And, we've gone back to this block letters this year, by the way. I don't know if we talked about that a lot, but we were using the Nike font, the custom Nike font, which still exists, and you see it on a lot of things. In the end zones for the last several years, but we've gone back to the block G, and they use the block G in the Georgia and Mercedes-Benz Stadium for the game. I was about to say the Georgia Dome. I've made my peace with that. I've talked about that before in the podcast. I keep messing that up, but anyway. So this is although this is the red version, the white version of the shirt. I have this exact same shirt in red, black, and white. And in the white version, I've had it for like 5 generations of shirts. Like I keep buying the shirt when the old one wears out, and then I get a new one. And I've had 5's maybe too much, but I've had at least 3 of them. And they don't make this exact shirt anymore. Champion has sort of changed. They don't have the same thickness on it. If you go to the bookstore, they have one now that has a bigger logo, and it runs right in, or a bigger Georgia, and it runs right into the G. It's just a little bit different and a little thinner material. I'm trying it out, but I'm not super excited about it. But anyway, the white version of this is a classic one when I'm worried about what I'm wearing and how that's going to affect the team, because clearly what I wear makes all the difference in how the team's going to perform. But I feel like it's my duty to get dressed in the right outfits I believe in. I've mentioned before, when we get to the Auburn game every year, I have the blackout t-shirt commemorating the blackout of Auburn in 1997. And I have worn that, 1997? No, 2007, sorry. And I have worn that shirt every year for the Auburn game ever since. And it's working great, right? We've won 20 out of 23 or something. So we're kicking butt. So I'm going to keep wearing the shirt. So there's a few things that I have a lot of confidence in my wardrobe. So I was a little, I was like, I got to get this right. And I brought this shirt down because I wore one of my favorite Georgia hoodies with a big bulldog head, heather gray hoodie. And I chose white socks, and I had my red and black underwear on. So, I was ready, but I also brought this shirt down because I will frequently change shirt and socks at halftime if things are not going well. I feel like we need to make adjustments at the half. I make those adjustments. So I was prepared to make adjustments. I didn't bring down another set of socks, but I could go get them if I needed to. But I was ready to switch from the sweatshirt to this more tried and true shirt. And, but I didn't need to. Obviously, the sweatshirt went great. But going back to the flow of the game, I think we all felt it, right? We were all sitting there. We've seen this movie before. And so it's great. We're up 14-0. But now, I will say I had a certain peace, because I had more peace coming into this game than I've had about an Alabama game. These Alabama games are the last thing left from the old vestiges of Georgia. I wish we could do this, but we're not going to get this done, or we can't get this done. We keep blowing this. This is our, we can't get past this. Obviously that was the situation with Florida for so many years, right? We lost 13-14 to Florida, and we talked about that before, 20 something or whatever out of however many. That was a nightmare. And 9 in a row to Tennessee and in the era that I really locked in big time as a Georgia fan, it seemed like we had more of that going the other way than not. The 9-game losing streak to Tennessee. Like I mentioned before the Tech game, we actually lost our first 2 games from my freshman and sophomore years, or my first 2 years on campus. We lost the first 2 games to Georgia Tech. So I came into that rivalry feeling like, wow, this is kind of an even rivalry. Or, we lost 2 in a row. We're going to have to win 2 in a row just to be like, we're going to have to, if I'm on campus for 4 years, we're going to have to win the next 2 just so when I leave campus, we were 2-2 against Georgia Tech, now that worked out. We did that, and more so, right? But in the, but there's a lot of this. a lot of these moments where it just seemed like, and especially a lot of those games against Florida, where it just felt like the thing that had to happen just always didn't. And that's definitely what's happened in these Georgia Alabama series. I mean, I don't know if Nick Saban has changed quarterbacks more than twice in his Alabama coaching career in a game, but he did it twice, and they were both against Georgia, and they both worked. I mean, star Jalen Hurts quarterback, you know, we just harassed him and punished him in the first half, and we're up 13-0. They can't score a point. He switches to Tua. I'm not going to try and say his last name without seeing it written. They switch to Tua. Tua leads the comeback. Okay. The next year, Tua's now been the starter since that game. Jalen's on the bench. And both these guys are going to be NFL starting quarterbacks. One of them is going to be an NFL Super Bowl winning quarterback. So, but here we are. Saban's got both those guys on the bench. Get all the way back to the Georgia game. Tua's been the starter since Jalen been the starter. Then they bench him for Tua. Tua's been the starter all the way till you get back to the Georgia game. Here we are up again, 14 points in the SEC championship game. What do they do? Bench Tua, bring in, and he had an ankle injury that made that more. But nonetheless, bring in Jalen Hurts. What's Jalen Hurts do? Lead him back from a 2-touchdown, deficit to ultimately win by a score. So, it was hard to get too comfortable and too excited, although I felt better than I normally did. I really felt like this feels, and again, like I said, look, we all can see DeBoer lost 7 games. He's not Nick Saban. This team is still, Alabama is undoubtedly still one of the 5 best teams in terms of talent in the country. DeBoer's record as a head coach is impeccable. I mean, he's actually got, he's like 123-18. Whereas Kirby Smart is 117-20. So he's unbelievably got a better record than Kirby Smart. Now, again, we won't get into all the comparisons. We talked about his record leading to the first game against Alabama. But so our failure to get that third score at the end of first half felt like a big deal. It felt like that was leaving the door open for the comeback. And it felt like, oh no. This was our moment. We go for the 4th down. We're 8 yards away from field goal range. Let's just kick this field goal and we're up by 3 scores. 3 scores. Surely we can play keep away and trade scores to keep a lead with 3 scores in 1 half to play. And when that doesn't happen, it's I'm all a little nervous now. Now I'm starting to get a little sweaty, a little nervous, like, you can feel the drama coming back that we've experienced before. But instead, what happens? Georgia comes out. Alabama gets the ball first. Offense stuffs them. We get the ball back. End up getting the score. Touchdown, 21-0. And so when you put together the two things we talked about, Cole Spear was onside. No funky penalty that took back the big moment that could have changed the game in favor of Georgia. And once we got that third score, I mean, statistically, it wasn't over. And I wasn't like, okay, that's it. I wasn't just dancing and partying. It still was like, mostly actually, it felt like, okay, now please clock. And it got to the point where I was looking like every play, every time we punt, they punt, I look up at the clock and be like, it's still the third quarter. We still got to play the whole 4th quarter. Like, I'm done with this. We're up 21-0. I don't need any more. We can stop now. This is great. But that's not what happened. But in the end, we did. We end up scoring 4 times, 28-7, largest victory against Alabama since 1976 for Georgia. It was the largest margin of victory. Here's another little thing. I always like how we correct the wrongs of our own history, right? This was the largest margin of victory in the SEC championship game since 2019, when Georgia lost to Joe Burrow's LSU 38-10. So that was a 28-point beatdown. So this was a 21-point beatdown. So we didn't beat that. But this feels like a little bit of correction. Like, okay, we were the team that got punished badly in the SEC championship game 5-6 years ago. So the fact that we were able to add a little legacy there, one of the biggest margin of victory in recent or any time in the SEC championship, and certainly one of Alabama's biggest defeats. It just, that all felt really good. So we're over the end of the quarter now, but I'm just going to look through a few things. I had some notes. want to talk about what else. We talked about the Big Ten championship. I actually maybe covered a lot of this. Said you can't really tell what we're looking at with that Big 12 championship game. But what I will say is this team has rounded into a team that, and I said this after the Tech game, the good of the Tech game. Yes, it was a little scary that Gunner had such a difficult game and the offense just sputtered and settled for so many field goals and only had 16 points on the board. But that being said, we controlled the game with special teams and defense, and it never really felt like we were going to lose. Well, this game was that on steroids. Same thing. We didn't have we ended up close to or a little less than 100-yardage differential. We had 297 yards in the game. We held them to 209. So, we were in the 80, 90 something yard differential. We've been averaging about 122 on the season. I've told you how I think that's an important stat. I also think it's, when you see a team go out and have an offensive performance where you fail to eclipse the 300-yard mark is sort of the minimum, like good or okay. 350 is pretty good or decent. 375 or above, you're starting to, a little above average. And once you get above 400, you're above average. And if you get to 500, that's outstanding, right? That's how I grade that. And so, yes, yardage differential is good. Well, this is an example of where some of the other phases of the game can be dominated and the yardage doesn't look the same. The yardage differential, we punted 7 times in this game, which is a lot, but 5 of those, we pinned them inside the 20. So again, kudos to Brett Thorson. Brett Thorson is a weapon. I'm going to miss him. And I think Drew Miller's got a lot of potential from what we've seen, but Brett Thorson, and again, he early in the game flips the script by punting the ball and having it just literally, it's as if there was a remote control on the ball. I mean, the ball hits and bounces out of bounds at the 6-8 yard line, just pins them in. And that was the theme. And in this game, Georgia average starting position at their own 40. Alabama average starting position was its own 18. So that's a huge part of the game. In fact, Georgia has no drives in this game, or only had 2 drives in this game that, that exceeded. Well, here's our scoring drives. So our scoring drives, 4 plays, 21 yards. So that's after the block punt. Then the next one, 14 plays, 7 minutes and 44 seconds, by the way. So again, talking about eating clock, controlling the game. But when you do that, being efficient enough to make sure you score touchdowns, 14 plays, 57 yards and a touchdown. Then our next scoring drive is 6 plays, 40 yards. And a touchdown. And our last play, of course, touchdown. Of course, this was after Kalen DeBoer's bizarre decision to go for it on 4th down from his own 12-yard line. So that's a 3-play, 12-yard drive. So for the last touchdown. So we didn't rack up much yardage in this game. We almost got to a 100-yardage differential, and they had a little bit of garbage. Garbage yardage towards the end of the game. So we had held them. They didn't crest the 100-yard mark until the start of the 4th quarter. Or right at the end of the 3rd quarter. They got out of their own end zone with a 21-yard pass, and that bumped them from 80-something yards over 100. And, they finished with 209, and they had the one scoring drive that was 91 yards and the touchdown. It was a pretty quick drive, 2 minutes and 37 seconds, 9 plays, 91 yards. But again, that one was helped by two 15-yard penalties at the minimum for Georgia. I meant to look up if we had more than that. Let me see. I was just curious about that. No, let's see. I don't see the penalty there. Personal foul. So we had the sack. Should have been the personal foul, but they got the 15-yard personal foul. And that was dumb on DeMello Jones. The guy headbutt him and he slaps him back. But it was also a bad call by the official. I hate when they just punish the second guy. It's like either see it or don't. And really, one guy gives a light headbutt, the other guy slaps him back on the helmet. Is that really personal foul territory? Was the game so chippy you had to do that? I mean, look, he slapped him, so he deserves the penalty, and it was a stupid thing to do. The second one, the pass interference, DeMello Jones was just a victim of a badly underthrown ball. Sometimes those lead to pass interference because you're trying to defend and all of a sudden the guy's trying to turn and run back and you almost can't stop but get out with the pass interference. So, No, it looks like those were the only 2 touchdowns. But that drive would not have survived and gotten those penalties were huge. So that's part of what made it so. But Georgia didn't have to drive the ball very much either, because interception, punt block, just overall great defense, getting the ball near and around midfield. We had the shortest scoring drives I can ever remember. We only had the one drive in the game where we went over 40 yards to get a touchdown, which was the 14-play, 57-yard drive. So that's where you see the yardage differential. But we dominated time of possession. We were good on third down, stopping third down. We were decent on getting third downs. We were better on first downs overall. We were better and more efficient scoring, obviously, the times we did have the ball. Alabama only scored when we gave them penalties to bail out what were going to be terrible yard and distance situations, or even fourth downs. And then they were able to mount one more drive where they get down and they turn the ball over on downs after getting down. They go on a 12-play, 58-yard drive that does get down to the Georgia 10-yard or the Georgia 17-yard line, and then they turn the ball over on downs. So those were the only 2. Listen to these Alabama drives. This is fun and you probably looked at this already, but just to recap it. 3 plays, 7 yards, 4 plays, 13 yards, 6 plays, 30 yards, interception, 4 plays, 13 yards, 3 plays, 8 yards. Then they just had the ball for 1 play and a kneel down end of half. So that one doesn't really count to start the second half. So again, they won the toss, deferred. What do they do with that? 3 plays, minus 8 yards. So that's great, right? So next drive, 3 plays, 7 yards. Next drive, 3 plays, 8 yards. Then finally 9 plays, 91 yards and touchdown. But then they go right back to 4 plays, 8 yards. And then finally 12 plays, 58 yards, and turn the ball over on downs. So just an amazing performance by the defense. I mean, they were great against Tech. Tech was a top 10 offense coming in. Alabama their offense had not been as good. They had been averaging over 400 yards a game. After this game, they're averaging only like 389 yards a game. So they've lost a lot of ground in that. Gunnar Stockton was fantastic in this game. He understood the assignment, is the way I would say it in this one. I mean, yes, I've seen more eye-popping stats, but by comparison, you go back and you look at the box score. And again, I've told you before, I don't really dig too deep into these QBRs because I don't exactly understand where they come from and what they mean. And even I've read what they mean and how they derive the formula, but I still don't it just doesn't mean that much to me. I guess it's that translation. If like you're taking a test, you're in school and you get 100, you know what that is. You get a 90, you know what that is. An 85, you know what that is. So you tell me I'm looking here at Gunnar Stockton's QBR was 83.9. I think that's pretty good. But what I can tell you is the comparison with Ty Simpson. Ty Simpson, has been great all season or most of the season. He threw for 212 yards, but only on 48% passing. He was 19 of 38. He had 1 touchdown, but he also had an interception. And his QBR for the game was 19.9. Gunner's is 83.9. So the difference is outstanding. Gunner on paper, he doesn't blow you away. He's 20 of 26, which, again, I love the efficiency there. That's great. But only 156 yards through the air. That's only 6 yard per play average. But 3 touchdowns, no interceptions. So again, doing what he has to do. Plus what he do on the ground, he's our second leading carrier, he's tied with Nate Frazier for 13 carries, second leading yardage guy, 39 carries. And so just consistently picking up yards and doing what I've talked about many a time, just keeping the ball, keeping the clock moving, grinding out the scores. You don't want to do that. Some people have pointed out that that's what Ohio State maybe wanted to do with the game against Indiana. Shorten the game, grind out long drives, and then, just sort of keep them off the field, just dominate and control the game, play the game at your pace. Well, that's great, but when you do that, you've got to score. Almost cost us against Georgia Tech because we didn't score enough. Against Alabama, 4 red zone touchdowns, four times in the red zone, 4 touchdowns. So only 4 of 11, 4 of 12 on principal drives in the game. Not as good a ratio as we'd like to see, but really good when you're when you score all 4 of your times in the red zone, you get touchdowns. So Georgia's also in this game, they continued. Bama just looking, let's see, the long play they had, Daniel Hill, the running back, had a 27-yard catch. Jeremy Bernard had the 23-yard catch that was the touchdown, their one touchdown of the game. They had a couple guys, two other guys had a 21-yard, a 20-yard play. So running the ball, they ran the ball. I mean, college football has a little bit of a goofy problem because we talk about how we held them to -3 yards. Well, part of that is Ty Simpson had 6 carries, and this includes his sacks. He was sacked 3 times. And so he lost 28 yards on 6 carries. He lost an average of 4.7 yards every time he ran with the ball. His long of the game was 1 yard. But the rest of their running backs only had 10 carries. So they didn't commit to the run, and when they did do the run, they got nothing out of it. Daniel Hill, 4 carries, 11 yards. His long was 5. Same thing with their freshman running back. Deere had a long of 5. Ryan Williams on a jet sweep was given the ball. He had a long of 5. That's impressive, as good as he is. So just no fundamental commitment to the run and very poor execution. 16 total carries, -0.2 average, and just a thorough beatdown in that regard. Georgia's moved up to number 3 in the nation in run defense, 3 or 4 in the nation. Our overall defensive stats, we've moved up to around 10th, 11th, 12th best defense in the country. And like I was talking about, and the other thing that's really great to look at is you see the defense really locking in too in terms of the last few games. Where did I see this? I had this hold up for you. Sorry. Oh yeah, here you go. So looking at the game log, opponents, here's our last couple games. So Texas, 274 yards. Charlotte, you would expect this, 169. Georgia Tech came in averaging 500 yards a game. They got 250. Alabama came in averaging 410 yards a game. They got 209. We held them 200 yards under their average. So yes, they're not great at running the ball, but we held them 200 yards under their average. And offensively, they had been able to generate much better than that. I mean, you look at recent times, they were not great against Auburn. They only had 280 yards. Against Eastern Illinois, it was 539. But they had the game they lost against Oklahoma, they primarily lost because they, for the first time all season, were turnover happy. They turned the ball over 3 times. But they had generated 406 yards of offense, ran 75 plays against the Oklahoma defense. Oklahoma's main claim to fame this season has been defense, but they were able to move the ball and put up 400 yards, but the turnovers killed them. Oklahoma didn't turn the ball over. They turned the ball over 3 times. So this was just a great performance. The elephant is off the back. It feels cathartic in every way. You even get the punt block that's like the mirror image. This time, everything goes right. The punt block, the momentum. Georgia just beats down Alabama. And I do think now you look at this team and you say, this team can springboard to anything. What I saw from the Big Ten, I think those teams are really good, and we're going to talk about more of that as we go through. We now have a 25 days. It's 25 days, counting Monday, until we play on Thursday, January 1st at 8 o'clock in the evening. So that's a big layoff. We got a lot of time to break down what's going to happen. Our playoff scenarios, I talked a lot about worrying about our playoff scenarios because the last thing I wanted to do, win or lose, even with this beatdown, I still didn't want to have to see Alabama a 3rd time. And the good news for us is we don't. We stayed in the 3rd seed, which I think was wrong. A quick word on that. Ohio State went 12-1. We went 12-1. We won the best conference in football, or arguably one of the 2 best conferences, which they're in the Big Ten, we're in the SEC. They failed to win the Big Ten. We are the SEC champion. We're both 12-1. We have 4 wins against current top 25 teams, which includes number 6, number 9, number 13, number 22. Ohio State, I think, has 1 win against a current top 25 team. They did not win the conference championship. So, yes, they look dominant on paper against a weaker schedule all season, but they I don't think their resume, I mean, if you just throw out the stats and you look at what they've accomplished, one win against a top 25 team, failed to win their conference, versus Georgia, 4 wins against current top 25 teams, 3 against the top 15, won the SEC championship, won the best conference in America. And it wasn't a fluke. Again, we weren't Duke. We didn't get in there with 5 losses. We had 1 loss. So we're right up there with the same number of losses. We should have been flipped. It should have been us number 2 and them number 3. But you know what? I'm all right with that, because it doesn't matter. When you're on the 2-3 bracket, the eventual matchup that you would say, if the best teams on paper win out, then you're going to run into the Georgia-Ohio State matchup. And that would have happened whether we were 2 and they were 3 or vice versa. So that would be your semifinal matchup to get out of this bracket and get on to the national championship game. So the good news is, at least by, being in that seeding, we wouldn't play them until you got to a semifinal. But, and we avoided having the potential Alabama rematch. That was my other big concern, is that if Alabama had come in as the 10 seed, if we had moved up to the 2 seed, which I think we deserved, and Alabama had gotten the 10 seed, which I think would have been very reasonable, then if Alabama were able to beat Texas A&M on the road, they would have a game on the 19th or 20th, so they'd be playing in about 12 or 13 days. We'd be sitting around to the 25th, but when we played that next game, if Alabama won their first playoff game, well, guess what? Our very next game after beating them in the SEC championship game would have been the 3 match, right? We would have, for the 3rd time, have to play them, and now it's to advance in the playoffs. And that just would have seemed ridiculous and unfair. And as it is, we are likely to end up with a rematch against Ole Miss. Not super excited about that. There's some other fun teams. Texas A&M is probably, I don't know. I really don't know, honestly. We'll talk about that more later. Is Texas A&M a better team than Ole Miss? Are they equal? Are they about the same? I don't know. My first instinct was to say Texas A&M may be a tougher team to play and a better team than Ole Miss, but I'm not sure I'm going to agree with that when I really break it down. So we're going to break that down, future podcast, and we'll figure that out. We got time to do that. But it would have been a more exciting matchup because we have played Texas A&M so infrequently, and we've already played and beaten Ole Miss. So just like Alabama having to play us and getting beat and really getting very little value out of having to play us again because they'd already beaten us once, we don't get much value. I mean, we get the value of we have to beat Ole Miss now. If they beat Tulane, and I think they will, they've already played, and Ole Miss won that game by 30 or whatever, 30 or 40 points. They'll probably win it again. They'll be at home, so they'll beat Tulane, then they'll advance to play us in the Sugar Bowl. That also, by the way, is a little concerning because I know as a Georgia fan, you probably feel like the Sugar Bowl is one of our second homes. Mercedes-Benz Stadium, there all the time, and as long as we hadn't been playing Alabama until this weekend, no problem, we win. Sugar Bowl, been there a bunch of times. We didn't win last year. We won when we were there the previous time. We played Baylor a while back in the Sugar Bowl. So Sugar Bowls generally work well for us, and Georgia fans love going to New Orleans, and so we usually pack it out. However, Ole Miss, with all the enthusiasm about their best season ever, even with losing Lane Kiffin, but now rallying behind Keith Carter, their athletic director, who threw Kiffin out and said, you can't coach. Hired Pete Golding, the defensive coordinator, to stay. So there's going to be a lot of enthusiasm. They're going to get this home game against Tulane. I guarantee you they'll be packed out and excited. They're going to win that game most likely. And then it's a short hop and a skip down the road for them to go from, being over there in Oxford. I mean, I say that. Oxford is actually way up at the north of the state, and it's a pretty good drive to the south. But nonetheless, it's not a inconvenient, not a route they're unfamiliar with, not a place they're unfamiliar with. Ole Miss fans will be more than happy, super excited, really, probably, I think, to go to a Sugar Bowl and get to play a traditional rival like Georgia. So an SEC rival and a team they used to play annually. So I think they'll be more than happy, and I think this will be one of the few times where it's not clear that Georgia's fan base is going to come out and own the stadium like they have so much of the time, like against Tech and I believe even against Alabama yesterday. So it feels a little like that's not great. We have to play Ole Miss again, and then you're probably going to end up playing them in the Sugar Bowl in a place that might create a little bit of a home field advantage for them, even though Georgia fans usually come in big numbers. And then you get through that game, and Ohio State's going to have to play the winner of Miami, Texas A&M. Either of those teams can beat Ohio State. I'm not saying they will, but I think they're good enough too, and that's a pretty good matchup between them. So whichever one comes out of that, then Ohio State's got that game. So in many ways, that 2 seed doesn't actually look like much of an advantage. I don't love playing Ole Miss in a rematch and playing them in New Orleans where it's so close to home for them, and they'll be super excited to come. But on the other hand, if you're looking for the easiest matchup to kind of advance along until you get to the harder matchups, the Miami Texas A&M winner, that's going to still be a really good team. Okay, so and then on the other side you got Alabama, Oklahoma, somebody advancing to play Indiana, JMU and Oregon. That's going to be Oregon advancing to play Texas Tech. I won't know what I really think about Texas Tech till I see Oregon play them. I'm not really sure what Oregon is, but I think Oregon is legitimately good, so we'll see. So that's kind of a little preview of where we are on the matchups. The good news is I worried that we were going to have maybe a three-peat against Alabama. That opportunity still exists, but basically the only way that can happen is if Bama advances to the national championship game, because they're going to come from the other side of the bracket. So we can only play them if they advance the national championship game and we advance the national championship game. And the honest truth is, while I'm really proud of the beatdown that we applied to Alabama yesterday, I think we can see that they're not necessarily built like Alabama teams of old. It would be a little bit of a surprise if they beat Oklahoma on the road and then beat Indiana and then beat Texas Tech or Oregon to then come and play us. If they do that, I wouldn't say it's impossible. It would be a surprise. So, but we do have to potentially have the rematch against Ole Miss. So that's less exciting. At least if we get past that, we got the winner of Ohio State versus the winner of Miami, Texas A&M. So that'll be interesting. So this is really exciting. I think we'll try to stick to the Monday, Wednesday, Friday podcast for this coming week. So this will count as the Monday podcast, even though it was put together on Sunday. And we'll be back Wednesday, and we'll just break down more of these playoff things and reactions and talk about some more things. There's a lot of discussion to be had about the playoff system itself, the committee, and we're going to get into that more in our next podcast. If I have a chance, we might do it earlier and stack a few podcasts, but we also can pace ourselves because, like I said, we got 25 days until we play our next game. So it feels like a whole off season basically coming in. I woke up today and I realized, it's all true. We beat Alabama. We beat them down. This was fantastic. And then I remembered, wow, we almost have a month till we play again. That's such a long layoff. I'm fired up. I'm ready to go. But I do think that none of those teams I've talked about, there's no team out there. And from what I saw, the bit I got to watch of the Big Ten title game, yes, those teams have been undefeated and dominating and 1-2 all season. I didn't see anything in there that this edition of this Georgia team, that it's grown into. And that's what we've been talking about all season. Can this team get to the playoff? Yes. Can this team advance in the playoff? Definitely out of 1 or 2 rounds. Can they win the national championship? I know we're only third in the odds to win the national championship and we're the 3rd seed, but there's nothing that Ohio State or Indiana can do that we can't match. We can play defense. We can play special teams. We can play offense. We can win a shootout. We can win a slugfest. And you saw the Big Ten championship game was a slugfest. That's what I kept thinking when I was watching it. I was like, we can win this game. I'm not saying we will, but if we were in the same game with either Indiana or Ohio State, like that one ended 13-10, we can win that game. We just saw that a few weeks ago against Georgia Tech. And without a little bit of just big bonus plays from special teams and the defense creating a turnover, the Alabama game also could have turned into a lower scoring game that was just won by dominant defense. So, because Alabama's defense, by the way, was fantastic. I think that's the other thing you have to realize. Alabama, I don't know how good Ohio State or Indiana's defense, their defensive metrics are above Alabama's, above ours, but I don't know how good they really are when you play. But when you saw them play each other, they allowed some yards and points, but they still, kept it pretty low. But we can play in that game. Whatever game we get into, we can play that game and win it. And we can do it against any of these teams. And I think that they have the confidence and the belief. And they're just getting better and better. And they're looking more and more dominant. That defense was flying. 19 pressures on Ty Simpson. 3 sacks is great. 19 pressures. He was never comfortable. He never had time. And it was different guys all over the field, all over the time. 6 or 7 pass breakups, 1 interception, 6 or 7 tackles for loss. Phenomenal job by the defense. So we've got enough offense to put together with that defense playing like that. We've got enough offense to grind out what's necessary to get the win in just about, again, any team in the country. So we should be fired up. There's no reason not to. Just the virtue of being our 16th SEC championship, back-to-back SEC championship for the first time since the 80s, just adding to the glory of this era of current Georgia football, just the domination, and now starting to write the last of the things that we haven't been able to do, beat Alabama with an emphatic win here to launch into our playoff campaign to go for a third national championship in the last, what is this? This is 2020. I should get this right. So we won in 21 and 22. We failed to get it. So in 23 and 24, and this is 25. So that would be our third national championship in 5 seasons to go with our third SEC championship in 4 seasons. And I think that's the other thing. We can officially say now that the passing on guard, Georgia has seemed to be slightly ahead of Alabama, even at the end of the Nick Saban era. But this is the other thing you can go to sleep on tonight when you think about everything we talked about here today, is that Georgia has clearly taken over the top of the SEC. 3 SEC championships in the last 4 years, 63-6 record. Alabama is 55-11 in that time span. So that's the last 5 years. Alabama's been good. They've won 1 SEC championship game, no national championships. Georgia in the last 5 years, 2 national championships, 3 SEC championships. Overall better record. Georgia has taken over the best team in the SEC last 5 years. So let's keep it rolling and just enjoy that. Noodle on that one for a while. Until our next podcast, probably Wednesday, go Dogs.